Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto comes back to the village with a girlfriend, part 1, subscribe if you enjoy the video, let's start the story. The tall blonde man looked up at the gates. How long had it been since he had last seen them? Too long. He muttered to himself as he took cautious steps towards the huge green gates. They were taller than he remembered. The builders after the Pain invasion must have done a good job. Slowly he walked forward. He lifted his hand up to shade his eyes. The sun was glaring down at him, causing small drops of sweat to roll down his forehead. He grimaced. He couldn't wait to get inside. Somewhere with air conditioning would be perfect. As usual, the gates were open, but the men guarding them were new to him. He approached them, picking up speed until reaching a sudden stop in front of the guard stand. There were two shinobi there. The one on the left was mid-30s, with brown hair cut very short. He was tanned. In contrast, his partner looked relatively young, no older than 26. He had red hair that flopped lazily over his right eye and quite pale skin. The man at the stand greeted him with looks of curiosity. He smiled. He must have looked like quite the sight. He had been traveling non-stop on foot for days, with no time to clean himself up. He rummaged inside the backpack he was carrying. His hands closed around a scroll and he pulled it out. Unrolling it, he showed the two guards. The one on the left raised an eyebrow. The one on the right smirked. "Nice try, kid, but that is the worst fake I have ever seen. You know we're ninjas, right? We can totally break." The Redeed brought his hands up into a seal. He attempted to break on the scroll. He failed. Puzzled, he turned to his older companion. "Atsuo, can you try please? It must be very complicated." The older ninja nodded and did the same as his partner had. Again, nothing happened. He furrowed his eyebrows and tried again. Still nothing. Apprehensively, he performed a series of quick hand seals. He reached out to touch the scroll, flowing chakra into it. A few words appeared. He read them quickly, then raised both eyebrows in surprise. He looked into the face of the blind ninja, who sighed in impatience. His partner, after reading the scroll, turned to the blonde, shocked. "You have got to be kidding me. This is a joke, right?" Atsuo continued to look at the blonde. "No, Arata, this is the real deal. We're sorry to have held you up, sir." With a flick of his wrist, the blonde re-rolled the scroll. Placing it back into his backpack, he flashed the guards a quick smile. "Thanks guys. Now tell me, is Ichiraku's ramen still in the same place it was 4 years ago?" Atsuo stood up and bowed. Arata did the same. Straightening up, Arata turned towards the blonde. "Yes, of course it is." "Awesome," said the blind, his face breaking out into his trademark grin. He turned and started to head quickly into the village beyond the gates. He'd barely started moving when he heard the older ninja's voice. "Wait a second." He turned to face Atsuo. The man was grinning. Gesturing towards the village, he spoke. "Welcome home, Mr. Uzumaki." Sakura looked out the window of the Konoha hospital. It was another sweltering summer day and she was stuck inside. Not that she was complaining. Today was a good day for her to be working. Work helped her forget the fact that today was the day when, 4 years ago, he had left. Unfortunately, by remembering that she worked to forget, she had remembered what she was trying to forget. Great, she thought. Now I'm confusing myself. She sat down on the bed she had just made. She hadn't had a break in a while, and it was the first time she had sat down all day. Sighing, she looked out the window again. There was no point denying it. Sakura would have much rather been outside, enjoying the gorgeous sunshine like everyone else, than stuck in the stuffy hospital. To tell the truth, there was hardly anyone in the hospital at the moment. With the weather so nice, there were no flu or cold cases. The ninja that were currently there were all recovering nicely. There haven't been a lot of dangerous missions lately. In some ways, Sakura was grateful for this. It meant not a lot of shinobi were getting seriously hurt. On the other hand, it was less work for the medic ninjas, and work was something Sakura definitely needed. Sakura stood up reluctantly. She had to continue her rounds. She walked towards the door and exited the room. Turning left, Sakura headed down the corridor and immediately bumped into someone. "Sorry," she said, embarrassed. Looking up, she saw Shizune. The Hokage's assistant smiled. "It's alright. I've been looking for you, Sakura." Sakura tilted her head to the left. "Really? Is something the matter?" Shizune bit her bottom lip and then opened her mouth to speak. She waved her hand in a dismissive gesture. "Oh no, nothing's wrong. Lady Tsunade just wishes to see you. She sent me to tell you that you're dismissed from work for the rest of the day and you are to go straight to her office at 3 p.m. Sakura nodded. "Thanks, Shizune. See you later." "You're welcome, Sakura. Remember, don't be late, Lady Tsunade will be waiting." Shizune's smile faltered for just a second before she continued down the corridor. Sakura kept walking and turned right. Was it just her imagination or had Shizune seemed a little apprehensive? Sakura exited the hospital and pushed the thought out of her mind. She was just being paranoid. The sun beamed down on Sakura. Phew, she was hot. She decided she would go home and get a hat. She had time. Her meeting with the Hokage wasn't for another 2 hours. Sakura's stomach growled. Gosh, she was starving. I guess that's what I get for skipping breakfast and lunch, she thought to herself as she walked. She passed by a few food stands. The aroma wafted up her nose and made its way down. Her stomach gurgled in protest as she ignored the stands. Sakura paused. What was that place her old team had gone to all the time? Ichiraku's. Ichiraku's. That was it. Suddenly, Sakura craved ramen. Well, I am hungry, she thought. It was only appropriate that she had Ichiraku's ramen today. After all, it was his day. Sunshine. It was one of Hinata's favorite things. She was drawn outside on days like this. The world was a brighter place whenever the sun shone, and that made her feel good. She leaned back on her hands and let the rays warm her face. A small smile danced on her lips as she closed her eyes. How she loved the summer. Summer was picnics, day trips, and longer training hours. On summer days, Hinata could sit in the soft grass of the training ground for hours, soaking in the light. A shadow fell over her face. Startled, Hinata opened her eyes to see a man standing above her. Kiba. She exclaimed, blushing slightly and scrambling to sit up straight. Inyazuka laughed and sat down next to her. Hey Hinata. Slacking off, are we? He asked, amused at her embarrassment. It was cute the way she went red when he surprised her. Hinata smiled at him. He knew perfectly well that she'd been training since dawn. Kiba grinned and grabbed Hinata's hand. She let him drag her up. When they were both upright, Kiba pulled her into a bear hug and kissed her on the nose. It's 1 p.m. in Hinata. You're working too hard. We're getting lunch. Hinata giggled and slapped him gently on the arm. He growled softly and let her go. Hinata linked her slim arm through his and they set off. They'd been dating for 3 years, but Kiba still couldn't quite shake the feeling that he was dreaming. Every moment he spent with her felt slightly surreal, like it couldn't possibly be true. He'd watched his shy, stuttering teammate grow and become the beautiful person she was today. She was still shy, but dramatically less than she had been before. She still stuttered, but only when she was really flustered. She had changed a lot, gained a lot more confidence over the past few years. Kiba likes to think that it was his influence that had done it. She was his now. It had taken years, but finally she was his. Kiba asked Hinata. She was looking at him, slightly bemused. Kiba realized he'd been staring at her for the past 5 minutes. Sorry, he grinned. I was just so distracted by this amazing, beautiful, confident girl that seems to be attached to me. Hinata laughed. He loved it when she laughed. It was a gentle noise, but full of joy. Out of all the sounds in the world, it was his favorite. The two had reached the main streets of Konoha. Everyone seemed to be out today, enjoying the weather. The village was bustling. Kiba stopped and spun Hinata around to face him. Have I ever told you how much I love you, Hinata? He asked, knowing full well that he had. Hinata had just opened her mouth to answer when she froze. In a second, Hinata's face had gone from clearly happy to shocked. Her body visibly tensed. Kiba was worried. Hinata. He said, gently grabbing her shoulders. He shook her lightly and she snapped out of it. Hinata. What just happened? Are you okay? Asked Kiba anxiously. I'm fine, Kiba. I just thought I saw and never mind. It's nothing. She smiled weakly. Eyes wandering. She was stuttering again. Kiba frowned. Something had happened. What had she seen? She'd been perfectly content listening to Kiba tell her how much he loved her. She'd looked at him, then out of the corner of her she had seen him. A tall man, with bright blonde, spiky hair. The clothes were no longer orange and she'd only caught a glimpse of his face, but she was sure. The bright blue eyes. The whisker-marked cheeks. It was Naruto. She would have recognized him anywhere. But it simply wasn't possible. Naruto left Konoha 4 years ago. He had cut off all contact. None of them, bar the Hokage, had heard from him in years. It all came rushing back. The feelings Hinata had managed to hold in had broken through her mental barriers, flooding her mind with memories, emotions. Love, despair, respect. It confused her to no end. She loved Kiba, not Naruto. Not the boy who had left them all behind. Who had never acknowledged her feelings. Damn it. No, this couldn't be happening. Naruto was not back. She'd been imagining things. There was no possible way for Naruto Uzumaki to be back in the Leaf Village. Hinata. She felt hands grasp her shoulders and she was literally shaken out of her trance. Kiba was looking at her, concern plastered all over his face. A small amount of relief showed when she looked at him properly. Hinata. What just happened? Are you okay? He asked, clearly worried. I'm fine, Kiba. I just thought I saw and never mind. It's nothing. She shot him a smile. Her eyes drifted on their own accord, searching for another glimpse of whatever that had been. She had to focus. She willed her eyes to stop moving. Shakily, she looked at Kiba. He was frowning. She smiled, a stronger one this time. She took a deep breath. I'm fine. Let's go. He didn't seem to believe she was okay. Hinata tiptoed and kissed him lightly. It seemed to reassure him a little, but he was still uneasy. He slung his arm over her shoulder and she snuggled into him. He kissed the top of her head. She sighed. It didn't matter whether she had seen what she thought she saw. He simply didn't matter anymore. Another order of ramen! Exclaimed the bright young man. Naruto had been sitting at Ichiraku's for a long time. The bowls were starting to pile in front of him. Tucci laughed. Glad to see you've still got that great appetite. His daughter, Am, brought another bowl of ramen over. Naruto thanked her and picked up his chopsticks. He slurped the food down while the father-daughter team watched in amusement. He had been gone a long time. They had missed him. Finishing his ramen, Naruto exhaled loudly and slammed the now empty bowl onto the counter. He beamed at Tucci and Am. Have you had enough now? Joked Am. Shush Am, don't hurry him. Tucci smiled and put down the ladle he was holding. It's good having our best customer here again. We were worried you would stay away from the Leaf Village forever. What brought you back? The man had said this in a light-hearted, jovial tone. He was surprised when Naruto tensed up. Was that regret in his eyes? As quick as Naruto's reaction to the question had been, his reaction was faster. In an instant he was smiling widely again. He chuckled. It was your ramen Tucci. Ichiraku was calling me and I had no choice but to listen. Pleased, Tucci picked up his ladle and filled another bowl with ramen. He handed the bowl to Am, who placed it down in front of Naruto. Naruto looked at Tucci. The older man pointed at the ramen. It's in the house. Go on, eat up. Naruto grinned and started to eat. Just before he fug in though, he paused. Thank you, Am, Tucci. You guys have always been good to me. He said, voice surprisingly gentle. Gently, Am patted Naruto on the shoulder. You're welcome Naruto. It's been a pleasure. Naruto nodded slightly and began to eat. Walking along the familiar streets, Sakura reminisced. Her memories drew her back to the days when she was just starting out as a genin. She had been so, well, happy back then. But she had also been naive. During those days, everything was so simple. Team 7 had been together in everything. It may not have seemed so sometimes, but they had been incredibly close. But then Sasuke had to go and wreck everything. Sakura clenched her fists. She had been so sure he would come back. Now, she knew better. He had betrayed them all, betrayed his village. So much had happened after that bastard left. The Akatsuki, the invasion of Pain, and the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. These events had marred Konoha forever, leaving it a much grimmer place than before. Or at least, that's what it seemed like for Sakura. Maybe Konoha hadn't changed. Maybe she'd been the one who changed. She laughed bitterly. Of course she had. She hadn't been the same after Sasuke left. She had striven to get stronger, believing she could bring him back. It had been no use. She had been the last person to give up on Sasuke. The only person who held on to hope after that, well, that had never given up. Even when it was clear that Sasuke would never come back, he had believed. But the moment she had given up hope wasn't when Sakura had seen Konoha change. It had happened after the war. Madara Uchiha had finally been defeated in a huge fight that scarred the landscape around it. With the insane man finally slain, his defeater had left to pursue Sasuke and had not come back. Yes, it had been when he left. That was when, through her eyes at least, Konoha had dimmed. Breaking her train of thought, Sakura found that her feet had taken her straight to where she wanted to go. The sight of the familiar stand was comforting, the smell delicious. For the first time in a little while, Sakura grinned. Sakura stepped inside and took a seat at the counter. There was only one other person in there, seated down the far left of the counter. Ignoring the other customer, she waved to Am. Sakura did not eat at Ichiraku's a lot, but she knew Am, having hung out with her a few times. Am came over, wearing a perplexing look. She kept glancing over toward Sakura's left. Hello, Sakura. I haven't seen you in ages. How are you? Asked a girl, eyes darting to the left and then back to Sakura. Why was everyone acting so strangely today? Was it just a vibe she was giving off or something? Deciding to ignore the girl's anxiety, Sakura proceeded to make small talk. Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Can I get an order of Sakura? Startled, Sakura turned around. She was staring into the chest of a man. Sakura swore. How did the man get so close without her noticing? How did he know her name? Slowly, she looked up at the man's face and gasped. Then Naruto? She stammered. Oh god, what the hell? He wasn't supposed to even be in the village. The blonde shinobi was taller and not wearing his trademark orange. That explained why Sakura hadn't even given him a second thought when she came in. He was wearing rather inconspicuous clothing. Black pants and a gray tank top and carrying a navy blue backpack. The hair was not as wild or spiky as before, but Sakura imagined that under the dust and grime, it was still the same bright yellow. His face was thinner, like he'd been eating little and moving lots. His skin was sun-kissed, showing a long time spent out of doors. All in all, he was most definitely Naruto Uzumaki. But a different Naruto Uzumaki than the one she remembered. He was more compassed. Before, it had seemed like Naruto was nothing but pent-up energy, ready to explode into action at any point. Now he carried himself like someone old beyond their years, almost a little weary. His eyes, once full of an uncontainable joy and determination, were too sharp, too focused. Now they betrayed little emotion. The blue pools were too deep to read, but there was an odd faraway look. All at once, she felt herself being pulled into a hug. Sakura made no attempt to return it or escape. Naruto released her and held her at arm's length. Sakura felt herself being studied. She couldn't move. Her body wouldn't let her. Slowly, she watched Naruto's face break into a grin. He let her go and reached one hand up to scratch his head. "Sorry about that, Sakura," he said nervously. Sakura nodded in response. Naruto felt a fist hit him in the face. He hadn't been hit hard enough to be knocked over, but it had hurt. A lot. He rubbed his cheek. Sakura stood and stared at her right hand. Quick, as a flash, she turned and walked away. "What do you mean, he's back?" said the blonde Kunoichi, confused at her friend's words. Sakura, still stunned, sat on Ino's couch. "I mean, he's here in the village right now." Ino looked suspicious. She raised an eyebrow at her friend. "Are you positively sure about Sakura? I mean, no one's heard from him in 4 years. What are the chances he'd come back now? I don't know why he's back. All I know is that he hugged me, said 4 words to me, and then I assaulted him in the middle of Ichiraku's." Ichiraku's? Typical Naruto. Sakura sat there, hugging a cushion to her chest. Ino looked defeated. Her and Naruto hadn't been the best of buds, but even she'd felt abandoned when Naruto had left. She couldn't imagine how Sakura must have felt. He had been her teammate and probably one of her best friends. For Sakura it must have been like losing Sasuke all over again. Sometimes, Ino missed Naruto. She didn't think about him very often, but there were moments when his absence just didn't feel right. The village wasn't the same without that knucklehead. But then again, his departure had been inevitable. He was destined to go chasing after Sasuke. Sasuke? Ino's eyes widened. She gasped, and Sakura looked up. "Sakura, yeah? When Naruto left, do you remember what he said?" Sakura snorted. Of course she did. It was raining. Strange, considering it was the middle of summer. The shinobi stood at the gates leading out of Konoha. He was still, not making any effort to get out of the downpour. Head bowed, he just stood. Sakura walked him. She was carrying an umbrella. It was yellow. For no apparent reason, Naruto had called her out to meet him there. As she approached him, he looked up with a wistful smile. Sakura noticed that he was carrying a blue backpack. "Naruto? Sakura? I'm glad you made it." Sakura looked at the 16-year-old shinobi. His face was unreadable. Sakura felt cold all of a sudden. "What's going on, Naruto?" she asked gently. The blonde remained silent, eyes downcast. Sakura took a step closer. "Naruto?" she repeated. He looked up and met her eyes. Softly, he spoke. "I'm leaving." Sakura swore she had heard him wrong. "You're what?" The boy broke eye contact. He looked down, staring intently at the puddles. "I'm leaving Konoha." Sakura froze. A sense of deja vu washed over her. It was happening again. She had to ask. "Why?" Naruto raised his head. Sakura felt his gaze pass through her, like he wasn't focused on her. "I'm going after Sasuke. I'll bring him back." "Don't do it, Naruto. There's no point, he's crossed the line." "No." He said that last word forcefully, almost shouting it. "I will never give up on him. I made a promise to you that I would bring him back." Sakura sighed, reaching out to place her hand on his shoulder. He flinched away. "I already released you from your promise, Naruto, please, don't." She pleaded with him, silently. He remained unmoved. Then, quietly, he said, "I need to do this. I never break a promise. If finding him means leaving my life, my village, and the people precious to me behind, then I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to bring him back." He turned away from Sakura and started to walk away. After about 5 steps, he turned back and yelled something at Sakura. "Don't try to stop me. Don't try to find me. I don't want you to." With that, the blonde left through the gates of Konoha. Sakura remained rooted to the spot, alone. Left behind again. As Naruto's first foot hit the ground outside Konoha, the world faded for Sakura. The color and vibrancy leached out, leaving only a stark gray land in its place. How could she forget? It had been one of those influential moments that defined her life. Her decision at that moment, she always wondered whether she made the right choice. She should have tried to stop him. She should have run after him and begged him not to go. But she didn't. She'd just let him leave. She had been the last to see him. Aside from the Hokage, he had told no one else that he was going. She'd been the one to tell all their friends he was gone. The experience hadn't exactly been pleasant. She'd told them everything, every word he had said to her. Sakura shivered, remembering those words. I'll do whatever it takes to bring him back. Realization dawned. Naruto was back. But Sasuke wasn't. Oh god. Now it made sense. That was why he was back. That was why he looked so different. Shaking, she raised a hand to her mouth. It couldn't be. Ino walked towards Sakura and sat down next to her on the couch. She hugged the pink-haired girl. Don't cry, please. Maybe it's not what we think. He might have another reason for coming back. Ino didn't believe herself, her words sounded flat. She knew that the only reason Naruto would come back alone was, no, said a muffled voice. Letting go, Ino looked at Sakura. Her friend was still hugging the cushion. Actually, hugging wasn't the right word. Crushing it to death with her monster strength would have been more appropriate. Sakura shook her head, face blank. It has to be. There's no other reason he would come back. Dropping the now severely deformed cushion, Sakura stood up and headed for the door. Ino followed and grabbed Sakura's shoulder. The girl spun around quickly, still wearing that mask of perfect calm. Don't think like that. You don't know for sure. No, I do. It's the only explanation. Thank you Ino, but I have to go. I have a meeting to attend to. Wrenching her shoulder out of Ino's grasp, Sakura opened Ino's front door. She left, shutting the door behind her. Ino sighed. That knucklehead had been back for less than an hour and he was already stirring everything up. Sakura was upset now. After a brief internal argument, Ino knew what she had to do. Grabbing a sun hat, Ino left her apartment, carefully locking the door behind her. Putting the hat on, she leapt up onto the rooftops of Konoha. She could see the bright pink of Sakura's hair, weaving her way through the masses. Hopefully, Sakura will be going to the Hokage. Ino pushed the thought away from her mind. There was no time for memories or feelings. She had to do what was needed. First stop, the Akimichi residence. Sakura wandered the streets of Konoha in a daze. Her head hurt too much to think. She just wanted to go home, crawl into bed, and stay there forever. She knew she couldn't. It was almost 3 p.m. and the Shizune's tone of voice had made the meeting sound important. Sakura couldn't just skip out on Lady Tsunade. Right, she decided. I'm going to see Lady Tsunade, then I'm going home. The Hokage's office had been rebuilt after the Pain invasion, but it still looked exactly the same. Tsunade had said something about nostalgia when asked why she hadn't changed the design. Sakura stepped into the building, past Kotetsu and Izumo, who nodded. They must have known she was coming and told to let her in without protest. She walked into Tsunade's office. The Hokage was sitting at her desk, intently reading a scroll. She had the strangest look on her face. Concentration, mixed with worry, anger, pain. She hadn't noticed Sakura entering. Sakura coughed quietly. Startled, the Hokage looked up and immediately her face straightened out. She smiled, putting the scroll aside. Sakura, you're here. That's good. We're just waiting on a couple of people, then we can start the meeting. Sakura nodded, more instinct than an actual reply. She looked towards the door. Lady Tsunade, may I ask what this is about? Tsunade leaned back in her chair. You'll find out in a second. Kakashi, this must be a record. You're actually on time. Startled, Sakura looked back towards the Hokage and saw a masked man behind her. It really was unusual for Kakashi-sensei not to be late. Hakushi smiled behind the mask. Now Lady Tsunade. How could I be late for something this important? He stepped out from behind her desk and stood next to Sakura. He nodded towards her in greeting. Hello, Sakura. Can't say I've seen you in a while. It's nice to see you too, Kakashi-sensei. Sakura turned back towards the Hokage. You said that 2 more people would be joining us. Kakashi's one. Who's the other? Tsunade winced. She had really been hoping she wouldn't ask that. The voice from the door spoke. I guess that would be me, huh Sakura? Sakura spun around to see the disheveled blonde in the doorway. He walked quietly towards them, stopping in between on the other side of Kakashi. He avoided Sakura's gaze, and Sakura avoided him. Turning to the copy nin, Naruto greeted him. Kakashi-sensei. Long time no see. Kakashi was surprised at the emotion he felt from seeing Naruto. It was not anger or joy. It was simply relief. He would never say, but having 2 of his students, one Obito's relative and one his sensei's son, leave the village behind without saying goodbye, really hurt. At least Naruto had come back, alive and seemingly unharmed. Kakashi was simply grateful for that fact. Not that he was going to tell Naruto. Naruto? He stated, turning his head back towards the Hokage. Naruto's face fell. It looked like neither of his teammates had forgiven him for leaving. Sakura had chosen to express this with a left hook to the face, and Kakashi had simply chosen impassiveness. Naruto wasn't sure which hurt more. Ahem. Naruto turned his head to see the Hokage watching him. Right. Sorry Granny Tsunade. He mumbled. Thank you Naruto. Tsunade sat up straight. As you, Kakashi, and Sakura just found out. Tsunade was interrupted by a snort coming from Sakura's direction. She glared at the girl, who apologized. Sorry Lady Tsunade. I found out about an hour and a half ago. Tsunade raised her eyebrows. Damn it. She'd been hoping that no one would see Naruto until she officially announced that he had returned. She noted the distance and tension between Sakura and Naruto. It seemed their earlier encounter had not gone so well. Tsunade sighed and continued to talk. Well, as I was saying, Naruto Uzumaki has returned to the Leaf Village. With his arrival comes certain news about your former teammate. Tsunade leaned forward and steepled her fingers. She took a deep breath in as she studied the faces of the shinobi before her. Sakura was biting her lip with an anxious look on her face. She was jumpy but didn't seem very surprised. Tsunade knew her apprentice well. Sakura was logical. She had met Naruto earlier and had also been the last to see him go. The fact that Naruto was at the meeting, combined with her earlier meeting and Naruto's last words, must have led to the conclusion that this meeting would be about Sasuke. Kakashi Haddock, like the experienced ninja that he was, showed no signs of surprise, aside from a slight raising of eyebrows. Naruto, on the other hand, was agitated. The young blonde had always been good at hiding his emotions, but those that knew him well could always tell what he was thinking. Tsunade avoided looking directly at each shinobi before continuing. With a grave tone, she spoke. It seems that Sasuke Uchiha, former shinobi of Konoha and member of Team 7, is dead. Ino stood by the wooden posts in the third training ground. She'd been waiting for a while, but for once, she didn't mind. She was too agitated to care about people being late. She fixed her already perfect ponytail. They will be here soon, right? Ino felt a presence behind her. She turned around to see Choji. With a quick smile, she closed the distance between them and kissed him lightly. Choji. Thank God you're here. Did you do it? The plump man smiled widely. I did what you said. I told Shino and Lee to spread the word. Everyone else should be here soon. Ino smiled. Thanks Choji. Choji sat down and beckoned for Ino to sit next to him. She shook her head. In a second. I want everyone else to get here. Choji could feel Ino's anxiety. The blonde was fiddling with her hair, tightening and retying her ponytail. Ino, are you okay? He asked, concerned about her behavior. I'm fine. Just impatient, that's all. Ino lied with a smile. She was worried. Normally, Ino loved to be the first to hear any piece of gossip. But this time, she really didn't want to be the one telling everybody else the news. Okay, if you say so. Choji knew she was lying, but he'd learned not to push her. If Ino didn't want to say why she was so flustered, then he would just wait. Choji settled into the grass and got out a bag of chips. He may, as well, snack if he was going to have to wait. The next to arrive were Neji and Tenten. The newly engaged couple had arrived arm in arm, Tenten looking slightly angry. Can you believe him? She asked Ino, referring to her fiancé. Shino, of all people, comes up to us while we're training and says we need to come to meet here. Neji, however, says that he'd rather train, so we'd be another hour. I did not say I would rather train. I said that I would like to finish my training first. Neji protested. You trained for 6 hours before lunch. You needed a break. Rebutted Tenten. Ino could sense that they'd been arguing about this all the way to the third training ground. Neji rolled his eyes. Well, after you threatened me with kunai, I decided to cut training short. Are you happy? Tenten kissed her fiancé on the nose and grinned. Yes, very. Neji smirked. It seemed their argument was over. He turned to Ino and Choji and nodded in greeting before sitting down. Tenten followed his example and looked up at Ino. What's this about? Shino said it was really important. Ino opened her mouth to answer but was interrupted by the arrival of Shino and Sai. The quiet bug ninja sat down without a word and nodded like Neji. Hello, said Sai. It is nice to see you. The artist smiled and settled down next to Shino. Ino watched the two. Shino was the same as ever, if maybe a little more open. He had ditched a hood and was back to just a high-collared jacket. Sai had improved in leaps and bounds since they had first met him. He still had a tendency to say inappropriate things, but he was much better at expressing emotion now. Shino and Sai had struck up a strange but functioning friendship. Neither were the most socially conscious people in the world and neither seemed to mind the other's little quirks. It was kind of cute in Ino's eyes. Sai, Shino. Glad you could make it. Shino acknowledged her greeting, then looked towards Choji. I have done, as you asked. I see that those I informed are already here. Choji grinned at the bug ninja. Thanks Shino. For a few moments after that, there was silence. Until of course, Lee arrived, dragging Hinata and Kiba behind him. Good afternoon everyone. What a brilliant day for a meeting of Konoha's most youthful shinobi. I am here as you asked Choji and I have done my duty. The other person should be here soon, he is just a little behind. Taoji thanked Lee, who sat down between Sai and Niji with a big smile. It was no problem, my friend. It would have been most rude to deny your request. Tiba sat down next to Shino and Hinata next to him. He draped an arm over her shoulders. Turning to Ino, who was the only one still standing, he spoke. What's this all about? Lee came and literally dragged us out of a cafe where we were eating lunch. Ino sighed. Lee must have been a bit too enthusiastic about the task Chaoji gave him. Sorry Kiba, Hinata. The shy girl shook her head. It's fine Ino. Lee did say it was very important. Though, I would like to know why. Ino looked around. Well, everyone's here. Wait. Everyone turned to Lee. Sakura is not here. Where is my beautiful cherry blossom in spring? She's at a meeting. Besides, she doesn't need to be here. She already knows. Knows what? Asked Kiba. Ino started again. Well, everyone's here so, Ino. This time, it was Chaoji. Ino, Shikamaru's not here yet. At the mention of his name, everyone tensed and looked at Ino. Her eyes were narrowed. The room was silent. Tsunade waited for Sakura and Kakashi to process the revelation. Of course, said Sakura quietly. She turned to Naruto. That's why you came back. Naruto nodded slowly, eyes cast down, refusing to make eye contact. Did you kill him? It was Kakashi, voice cold, contained. Naruto didn't answer. Naruto Uzumaki. Look at me. Hesitantly, he looked up. Kakashi locked eyes with him. Naruto, did you kill Sasuke? Naruto swallowed and shook his head. No, I didn't kill him. But I might as well have. What do you mean? Asked Kakashi, still icy. Naruto was still, but he began to speak. 4 years. It took me 4 years to find him. It was a few weeks ago. I had caught up and we were fighting. It was one of Orochimaru's old bases. Tsunade hissed. She would never forgive that snake bastard. We had been fighting for a long time. We were both exhausted, weakened. It was nearing the end. Or I thought it was. Naruto stopped and looked towards Tsunade. The Hokage nodded for him to continue. It was down to the wire. I didn't want to kill him, but he wanted to kill me. He tried to use Amaterasu on me, and he missed. The beams caught fire and started to burn. I threw a mini Rasen shuriken at him and it hit, but only his leg. It knocked him over. I ran towards him. I needed to get him outside. He tried to use Amaterasu again, but he must have been out of chakra because it didn't work. Naruto winced. Sakura and Kakashi watched him intently. They were tearing the place apart. The base was already in bad shape, but now threatening to crumble on top of us. I kept yelling at him, trying to make him realize, but he wouldn't listen, so I started to approach him. I had to get him outside before the place collapsed. So I ran, but he stopped again. He was shaking. Sakura approached him and put her hand on his shoulder. My attack must have gone through and hit the beams behind him. They just collapsed. I cried out, but he didn't notice, or he ignored me. He was too caught up in trying to attack me again. The roof was only being held up by those beams. I thought they would hold, but he had burned the wood up and mine had sliced right through them. The roof collapsed. It was too late. I kept screaming at him to get out of the way, but he wouldn't. By now, Naruto's voice had dwindled down to a whisper and he was looking at the floor again. The ceiling was made of stone and it fell and hit him. I saw his face. I saw his expression when he fell. I heard his neck snap. Sakura gasped and bit back a sob. She grabbed Naruto's arm. Kakashi approached the two of them. He knew the pain of having someone so close die. He never thought it would be one of his students. Sasuke may have been a traitor now, but once he had called Kakashi sensei. I couldn't save him. I couldn't save my best friend. Nothing moved, save for a tear, which fell from Naruto's face to the floor. He had failed Sasuke, failed to bring him back. Now he is gone forever. Kakashi placed a hand on his other shoulder and his other hand on Sakura's shoulder. The three stood there. Tsunade spoke, not wanting to interrupt the team. Naruto, how did you survive? If the roof collapsed, why are you still here? Not looking up, Naruto spoke. The roof fell, but I wasn't hit by anything as big as the piece that got Sasuke. Was badly injured and knocked out, but the Kyuubi must have healed me or something. When I came to, I was under rubble, but I had no damage from the roof actually falling. I guess I just got lucky. But Sasuke didn't. He spat out the last sentence. It was full of guilt and anger. Sakura hugged him gently. It's not your fault, Naruto. Thank you, Sakura. His voice was quite disbelieving. Are you sure he's dead? Asked Tsunade. It was an insensitive question, but she needed to ask it. Naruto nodded. After I woke up, the first thing I did was to check on Sasuke. Where he'd been, it was a pile of stone and wood. I dug through it, calling his name. He didn't answer. Eventually, I got to the bottom and he was there. His neck was broken. I took him and I buried him in the woods nearby. I couldn't bring him back. The blonde looked up at Sakura, nothing but pain on his face. I'm so sorry. And there you have it. The fate of Sasuke Uchiha. I found this chapter hard to write and I'm really sorry about Naruto's recount. There were way too many ellipses. Again, I found that incredibly difficult. 0.0 Please R&R constructive criticism welcome, positive feedback is loved. Arc. He couldn't see anything. Where was he? It was cold. Dark and cold. He was stuck. He tried to move his fingers, but he found he could only wriggle them slightly. Okay. That was progress. All he had to do was wait. He paused. There was nothing. He couldn't hear anything or sense the chakra of anyone else. He was alone. Good. That meant it seemed everything had worked out after all. The atmosphere in the room was heavy. Tsunade felt it settle on her shoulders, a blanket of grief and misery shared by the three other people in the room. Silently, she stood and left the room. It felt wrong being there with the three of them. She closed the door behind her, leaving the remains of Team 7 to their grief. Walking past, she instructed Kotetsu and Izumo not to let anyone else in. May we ask why, Lady Tsunade? Asked Kotetsu. Tsunade shook her head. The pair shrugged and remained behind as she walked out of the building. Oh god. Tsunade realized something. It had been hard enough seeing Sakura and Kakashi take the news, but now, because she was the Hokage, she was going to have to inform the rest of Konoha shinobi. She had to tell them that the last Uchiha was dead. Tsunade could see that the next few days would be hectic. First, there would be a public assembly to inform Konoha. Then days of deliberation over things like Sasuke's funeral and/or memorial service, what to do with the Uchiha compound, and whether to put his name on the memorial stone. And of course, she would have to send hunter nins out to find Sasuke's body. She made a note to ask Naruto for more information about the location of his grave later. But first, she had to let him grieve. It was over. Sasuke was dead, and Naruto was home. There didn't need to be any more fighting. The source of all her pain and sorrow was gone. But as she stood there, head bowed in the Hokage's office, Sakura felt almost nothing. As Naruto had been telling his story, she'd felt this sense of anticipation. She was shaking, overcome with sadness and shock. Although, all through, she'd known where it had been leading. It was like she'd read the book and already knew the end. When she'd heard him say that Sasuke was dead, all of that emotion seemed to recede. The finality of the statement, the way he'd apologized to her, he'd been so broken up about it, while she simply went through the motions. She should have been angry he was dead. Or relieved that Naruto was back. She could have been joyful, shocked or at least sad. But there was nothing. There was just this emptiness inside her, a void where some emotion was missing. It wasn't right. Something didn't feel right about Naruto's story. She said nothing about this. She couldn't doubt Naruto now. Not while he was so broken up and shaken. She had to be crazy. There couldn't be anything wrong with what Naruto had said. Sasuke was dead, and that was that. So why didn't she feel something other than doubt? Naruto, his best friend, and Kakashi-sensei, his old teacher, were grieving for Sasuke. But her, the one that had claimed to love him more than anyone else. Well, she didn't feel anything, but a nagging voice in her head telling her something was off. Sakura looked up. The masked man had removed his hand from her shoulder. In a rare sign of affection, Kakashi-sensei stepped closer to the shaking blonde boy and hugged him. For a moment, Naruto fell silent. He tensed up, not quite sure what was happening. But that moment was fleeting, and he began to cry. Kakashi didn't let go. It was like in that one hug, Kakashi was expressing all the attention and love that he had failed to give his sensei's son for 20 years. Sakura looked away, feeling like she was seeing something too private. This was their moment. Kakashi released Naruto and stepped back, unsure of what to do now. The blonde was no longer shaking as bad as he had before. Thank you, Kakashi-sensei. He said softly, voice full of gratitude, looking the man straight in the eye. Kakashi did not say anything in reply. His one eye showed only regret. The man had let down that mask of indifference. Naruto, Sakura, said Kakashi. Sakura turned back towards the pair. I'm sorry. Sakura looked surprised. Naruto frowned in confusion. Sensei, what do you have to be sorry for? I'm the one that couldn't. I have everything to be sorry for. Kakashi stated, voice calm but sorrowful. I failed him as a teacher. I couldn't give him the power he wanted and I let him go down that path of revenge. I spent my time teaching him. I taught him the Chidori, all the while ignoring you Naruto and you Sakura. I saw too much of myself in him and wanted to guide him away from the direction he was going. But I couldn't. For that, I'm sorry. With that, Kakashi flickered out of the room, leaving behind a guilt-stricken Naruto and an apologetic Sakura. It wasn't his fault, said Naruto, shaking his head. He wasn't speaking to Sakura, merely stating his thoughts, as if Kakashi was still in the room to hear them. Hesitantly, Sakura put her hand on his arm and tugged lightly. He looked towards her, not quite focusing on her. He was still a little bit lost in his own thoughts. Hey, it's alright Naruto. She spoke with caution, treading lightly. He knows it's not his fault. But it's not yours either. We're all blaming ourselves, but in the end. Sakura looked down at her feet. She didn't know how Naruto would react to her next statement. She looked up to meet his eyes. The blue orbs were expectant, yet distant. In the end, the fault was Sasuke's own. She took in a shaky breath. She waited for him to explode, start yelling, or break down, and cry. Instead, he simply smiled. Yeah, I guess you're right, Sakura. The blonde had composed himself, hidden his sadness behind a facade of cheer. It's been a while since I've been in the village, huh? Sakura smiled. She pushed her thoughts aside as the two walked out of the Hokage's office, looking almost content. Are you kidding me, Naruto? It's been 4 years. She joked, rolling her eyes. Naruto grinned, giving a small wave to Katetsu and Izumo as they walked past the pair. Katetsu blinked in surprise and Izumo rubbed his eyes like he was seeing things. Sakura, amused, realized they must not have known Naruto was back. Sakura and Naruto walked amicably, keeping up a pleasant if slightly generic conversation. As they walked, people would stop and look at the blonde, not quite sure whether they were seeing who they thought they were seeing. It really had been a long time, and Naruto had of course ditched the orange jumpsuit that made him so conspicuous. They walked without a direction. The two stopped when they found themselves at where it had all begun. Hee. Guess we subconsciously led ourselves here, Sakura, said Naruto, happy to see the old place. Looks like you're right. Sakura smiled. The third training ground. She hadn't been here since doing the bell test the last time Naruto had returned to the village. Naruto grinned, getting an idea. Hey Sakura, let's go do the bell test. For old time's sake. Naruto, hate to burst your bubble, but we need Kakashi-sensei for that. The blonde dropped his grin. Sakura grimaced. Damn it, she shouldn't have mentioned Kakashi. Naruto smiled, more weakly this time. Oh, right. We could just take a look then. Sakura agreed, and the two shinobi walked in. The 8 shinobi gathered around Ino waited anxiously for a reaction. Ino noticed them all staring and immediately relaxed her face. Oh. She said in an offhand tone. I didn't realize that he wasn't here yet. The other 8 let out a collective sigh of relief. The fact that Chaoji had mentioned Shikamaru and Ino hadn't done anything was a good sign. Ino sat down next to Chaoji. She couldn't believe her own boyfriend had mentioned that bastard. She prayed that Nara wouldn't show up. At that moment, Shikamaru arrived. Unfortunately, the only gap in the circle the shinobi had made was in between Ino and Hinata. Seeing the problem, Hinata shifted to her left, as did Kiba, Shino, and Sai, creating a gap next to Lee. Shikamaru sat down silently. The tension within the group rose tenfold. The atmosphere grew icy. Finally, Ino spoke. Now that we're all finally here, I have something really important to tell you guys. How troublesome. I was in the middle of something, said Shikamaru under his breath. Ino's head snapped towards him. What's that, Nara? You think this isn't important enough to take some of your precious time? She said in a sickly sweet tone, glaring at him. Shikamaru sighed and shook his head. I'm glad to see you've left that Suna slut at home today, she mentioned in a spiteful tone. Chaoji put his hand on her shoulder in an attempt to placate her. Maybe it hadn't been a good idea to tell Shikamaru about this meeting. But then again, Ino had said all of their friends. Temari is on a mission today. She is not a slut, drawled Shikamaru. Troublesome. He really did not feel like arguing with his ex-girlfriend. How long would Ino hold a grudge? Whatever. Ino huffed. Anyway, what I have to tell you is well, kind of really quite important. Just get to the point already. You've said that like 5 times. Exclaimed Kiba. Hinata shushed him. Well, Ino froze up. She really didn't want to be the one to tell them. Maybe she should just wait for it to be officially announced. No. They deserved to know he was back. Well, you see, the reason I called you here today is. Ino's eyes widened and her mouth dropped into an O. It looked like she wouldn't have to spread the news after all. Walking right towards us. 9 pairs of eyes swiveled towards the direction Ino was looking, only to see Sakura and Naruto. Naruto had seen them just before they saw him. All 10 of his best friends, sitting in the grass in his old favorite training ground. Restraining himself, he walked slowly towards them, Sakura lagging slightly behind. It was about time he saw all his friends again. He just didn't think they'd all be conveniently in the same place at once. The group continued to stare at him, not saying a word, not moving an inch. Could it really be? Konoha's number 1, hyperactive, knucklehead ninja was back. Lee was the first to react. Immediately, he jumped up and sprinted towards Naruto. Skidding to a stop in front of him, he beamed. Naruto Uzumaki. You have returned. You have been gone a long time, but it is good to see you back. Lee posed in the trademark nice guy pose. The sun reflected off his flawless white teeth, almost blinding Naruto. I trust that you have used your years most effectively and grown much stronger through training. You are certainly looking the most healthy and youthful. Naruto grinned. Lee hadn't changed a bit from his thick fuzzy eyebrows to his green spandex suit. Lee. It's good to see you too. Naruto. We must spar together soon. I have grown much in ability and I will beat you. Lee dragged a laughing Naruto back towards the group who waited, still and anticipating. During Lee and Naruto's small encounter, Sakura had made her way quickly to the group and settled herself between Ino and Hinata. She looked at the blonde girl, who had a curious expression on her face. Oh my gosh, so he really is back. Sakura nodded. Ino squinted a little. He looks different, don't you think? There's something weird about him. But like, a good kind of weird. Sakura agreed, but she had a feeling what Ino had noticed would not be what she herself had. What do you mean? She asked the blonde girl. Is it just me, or is he much better looking than before? It's amazing what 4 years does to a person. Sakura rolled her eyes. Of course. Typical Ino. Really Ino? What's different? Ino shrugged. What? I noticed other things too. For one thing, he ditched the orange, which is definitely a good thing in my book. He's taller, tanner, and just all around sexier. It helps that he's got this kind of vibe now, like he's hiding something. It's mysterious, like how Saz. Ino stopped herself and looked at Sakura with wide eyes. Sakura ignored her. Ino was more perceptive than Sakura had thought. She was right. Naruto was hiding something. Sakura had felt something strange ever since the meeting in the Hokage's office. She had brushed it off though, not really wanting to think about it. But Ino's words had confirmed her suspicions. Naruto was keeping something to himself. Her train of thought was broken when Lee and Naruto arrived. The green ninja had the formerly orange ninja by the arm and in his enthusiasm had physically dragged Naruto back towards the group of waiting shinobi. After depositing Naruto on the outside of the circle, he noticed Sakura. Sakura. I cannot believe I did not notice you had arrived sooner. My awareness of your beauty was hindered. Can you ever forgive me? Sakura sighed and gave him a weak smile. Yeah, surely. Naruto stood awkwardly. He could feel the eyes of his peers burn into him, evaluating him. No one had made a move towards him yet. Taoji was the first to stand up and step forward. The kind young man enveloped Naruto in a quick hug. Naruto? You're back. He exclaimed loudly, with a huge grin on his face. Naruto relaxed. Ah, yeah, I guess I am. Slowly, the other members of the group sprang to action. Standing up, they approached Naruto, the more enthusiastic ones moving faster. He was surrounded with Chaoji, Ino, Tenten, Kiba, Lee, and surprisingly, Sai at the front of the pack. The others hung back. It wasn't really in their natures to go charging towards him. Naruto was bombarded with a chorus of greetings. How have you been, buddy? Eating right. Naruto. Wow, you look good. It has certainly been a long time since we have seen you. Hey, the knucklehead's back. You're looking quite youthful, my friend. And Naruto. Troublesome. I was really comfortable sitting down there in the grass, Naruto. Looks like everyone's happy to see you, Naruto. Naruto? You're back in time for the wedding. Naruto looked at Tenten, who was wearing a huge smile. Wedding? He asked, looking at her left hand. On it sparkled a diamond ring. Tenten turned around and grabbed Niji's hand, which wore a matching gold band. She pulled him forward. We're getting married. Niji rolled his eyes casually at his excited fiancé. It's good to see you, Naruto. I trust you'll come to the wedding. Wow, of course. Congratulations, guys. I didn't even know you two were dating. A lot of things have changed since you left, Naruto Uzumaki. Heads turned towards the quiet shinobi who had spoken. Shino's words changed the mood of the group. It turned a little more somber. Naruto felt guilt wash over him, staining his happiness. Shino, the bug nin smiled on a small side. It is nice to see you remembered who I was this time around. Naruto laughed and the mood lifted again. Everyone was all smiles. Eyes, we're standing in the middle of a training ground. Let's go get some ramen. On me. Kiba groaned. Typical Naruto. How about you try something other than ramen for a change? Naruto looked offended. Geez, Kiba. Fine, you pick a place. Kiba turned to Hinata, who was standing right at the back of the group. Hinata, what was the name of that place we went to last Saturday? Natsuki's. Chaoji brightened up. Oh, that's one of ours. I'll tell Dad to save us a table. Wait, so we aren't going to go eat now? The attention was back on Naruto. Awkwardly, Sakura spoke up. Naruto. You're kind of messy right now. Naruto looked down at his clothes. They were covered in dust and grime from having been traveled in for 2 days straight. He remembered that he hadn't had a chance to clean up since returning to the village. He must have looked like quite the sight. Sheepishly, he grinned and rubbed the back of his neck. Right, forget about that. So dinner at Natsuki's tonight then. I'll tell Dad 7 p.m. Is that okay? This was met with approval. So it's settled. Everyone will meet outside Natsuki's at 7 p.m. tonight, said Sakura. There was a flurry of nods and agreements from the gathered shinobi. Okay then. Well, I should probably go and get cleaned up. Chaoji's dad won't like it if I stink up his restaurant. With a smile and a wave, Naruto walked away. The group of shinobi slowly started to split off until only Chaoji, Ino, and Sakura were left. I'm going to head off to talk to dad now. I'll see you later, said Chaoji. Ino kissed him quickly on the cheek before he left. Ino looked at Sakura and the two girls started walking back into the streets of Konoha. So, what are you going to do now? Asked Ino. What do you mean? Replied Sakura. You know perfectly well what I mean, stated Ino. Sakura sighed. She did know exactly what Ino meant. Now that Naruto's back, how do you feel? I don't know, Ino. I don't know what I feel and I have no idea what to do. I need some time to just sort everything out, you know. Ino nodded in understanding. So what did you think? Asked Tenten. Niji frowned. He looked different. He stated simply. Really, Niji? Care to elaborate? There are the physical changes of course, but most striking are his eyes. They used to be full of this determination. Now they are empty of emotion or just unreadable, even to me. Tenten agreed. You're right. Do you think it has anything to do with why he's back? Probably. The couple turned and entered the Amanaka flower shop. Tenten, we should not pry. Naruto will tell us in his own time the reason for his return. I guess so. We should just leave it for now. The two were greeted by Inoichi Amanaka. Where to choose floral arrangements? He guessed, smiling at the young couple. Of course. Chirped Tenten. Letting go of Niji's arm, she threw herself into a conversation about flowers. I was thinking of using blue and white as the color scheme. I don't really want to use pink, but roses would be nice. Yes, I see. What about some dark blue delphinium around white roses? I'm not sure. Can I see it? Of course. Come this way please. Inoichi led Tenten through a door behind the counter. Niji sighed. He had a feeling he would be here for a while. Shikamaru arrived at his apartment to find the door unlocked. Drawing out a kunai, he entered cautiously, only to find Tamari sitting on the couch, reading over a report, pen in hand. She looked up when he entered and put the report down. You're back. He commented. I didn't think you'd be back so soon. It was a false alarm. Turns out the enemy ninjas seen by the civilians were actually training dummies, said Tamari simply. She glanced at the weapon in his hand. Noticing her gaze, he put the kunai away quickly. Where have you been? She asked with a smirk. Ino called everyone together for a meeting, he said, sitting down on the couch next to her. Ino? Said Tamari, raising her eyebrows. Don't worry. This time, she didn't try to kill me. He replied. Still, Tamari said apprehensively. It was about Naruto. He's back in Konoha. Tamari looked shocked. Naruto? As in, Uzumaki. Shikamaru nodded. But he hasn't been seen for 4 years. Why is he back now? Shikamaru shrugged. He didn't say, but I have a theory. I see. I should write to Gaara immediately. He'll definitely want to hear about this. Good idea. By the way, we're going to dinner tonight. Tamari looked at Shikamaru strangely. We are? Troublesome, I know. Nitsuki's at 7 o'clock. Naruto's treat. I suppose that means it won't just be you and me. And Ino will be there, won't she? Are you sure I should go? Shikamaru sighed and nodded his head. Taoji should be able to control her. Besides, Ino wouldn't want to make a scene in public. Hasn't stopped her from doing it before. Just come, alright. Tamari smiled and kissed Shikamaru quickly. Of course I'll be there. But if she's rude to me, well, don't blame me if Blondie ends up in hospital with a fan shoved down her throat. Troublesome woman, said Shikamaru with a smile. That's why you love me. Tamari leaned over and kissed him quickly. Now leave me alone. I've got to finish this report for the Hokage. Sai and Shino walked in an amicable silence until Sai spoke. It was quite nice to see Naruto again. The bug nin agreed. Yes. I am not too sure, but did Naruto seem a little different to you? Asked Sai. He did. Something has changed him. Sai nodded. His instincts had been correct. Naruto Uzumaki. The name had haunted her for 4 years. No matter how hard she pushed it to the back of her mind, no matter how hard she tried to forget, it remained there, a faint presence in every thought. She didn't like to admit it, but it was there. Hinata looked at Kiba, who was chatting away, oblivious to the fact that Hinata's mind was elsewhere. Brave, kind, cheerful Kiba. He had been the one to rescue her. Save her from the depths of her self-pity. Why couldn't she just move on? A year after Naruto had left, Hinata had shut herself down. Naruto had left before, but it had been different. That first time, she had watched him go, with the knowledge that he would be back. So she only had to wait and hope. But 4 years ago, Naruto had disappeared without a goodbye. For a week or so, many people thought he had become a missing nin. The 5th Hokage had had to officially announce Naruto's long-term leave before those rumors died down. When Hinata had heard, she was devastated. But quickly, that had turned into anger. Now normally, Hinata was a very calm, forgiving, placid girl. But something in her snapped. How dare he leave? She had loved him in secret for years. Finally, she builds up the courage to tell him while simultaneously attempting to save his life. And does he appreciate it? No. She'd almost died for him and he hadn't said a word to her afterwards. He hadn't even said goodbye before abandoning the village. Yes, Hinata had gotten very, very angry. But after the anger came guilt. She felt horrible for getting mad at him. Surely, he simply hadn't meant to hurt her. When he thought she had died, he had gone into an almost unstoppable rage. Maybe that meant he did care. Hinata had tortured herself with those thoughts for weeks. This had led to a small breakdown of sorts. It wasn't a dramatic breakdown. There was no crying or screaming or acting crazy. There was just a blankness about her being. She became quiet, quieter than usual, almost never speaking. She stopped training as hard, preferring to sit and stare into space. Everyone became quite worried about her. Niji, Kurenai, Shino, and Hanabi all tried to break her out of that state of nothing, but they couldn't. It seemed like no one could. But Kiba did. He had calmly dragged her outside, not making any attempt to coddle her. He simply acted the way he normally did. And for the first time in a year, Hinata had felt something other than pain. Slowly, she returned to normal. In fact, she became better than she had been before. Everyone noticed the change in her and accredited it to Kiba. She'd grown to love Kiba. He was the brightest thing in her life. But deep down, she hadn't forgotten Naruto. But did she still love him? So now what? Hinata asked herself as she and Kiba approached the Hyuga estate. She really looked at Kiba. He was laughing at some joke he'd made. She smiled. Kiba didn't deserve to be ignored. She could sort out her feelings later. She laughed along with him, consciously pushing all thoughts of a certain blonde shinobi away. At that moment, Hinata only knew one thing for certain about how she felt. She was really dreading dinner that night. The trip back to his old apartment was uneventful, so Naruto found himself thinking about his friends. One friend in particular. Sakura. It seemed like Sakura was the same as ever. Naruto had never been the most observant person. He knew that his leaving had hurt her and he was sorry about it. Hopefully though, it hadn't impacted her too much. Sakura was tough. She'd probably moved on from what little feelings she may have had for him. It may have just been the fact that he hadn't seen her in 4 years, but Sakura sure was prettier now. She carried herself more maturely. It had been a while. Sakura probably has a boyfriend now. One that wouldn't leave her for the world. She deserved that much. When Naruto arrived at his familiar old home, he opened the door to see that the place had been cleaned up. It seemed that Granny Tsunade must have sent someone in to dispose of all the expired food and rubbish. Luckily, the 5th Hokage had seen fit to keep the apartment exclusively for Naruto's use. It had stood empty all the years he was away. Other than the slightly unnatural tidiness and general emptiness, the place was exactly the same. His old poster of the Konoha symbol still hung above his bed, a little faded and rolling up slightly at the edges. He remembered sitting under it on his bed just before the funeral of the 3rd Hokage. After that, every morning when he had woken up, he had sworn to protect the village and continue the will of fire. Whenever something terrible had happened or nothing seemed to be going right, he had sat and looked up at that poster. It reminded him of his dream to become Hokage. It inspired him to never give up, to keep hoping. The will of fire. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Hokages had all possessed it and therefore were able to give their lives for Konoha. His very own father, the 4th Hokage, had had it also. Granny Tsunade, the 5th Hokage, was carrying on her predecessor's spirit. When Naruto saw that poster, he saw the Hokage's legacy. It stood for everything he admired and wanted to be. But he had left the village to do what he felt was right. He had a gut feeling that many people had considered that a betrayal of sorts, leaving to chase after a lost cause, instead of staying and training to become Konoha's next leader. Could he ever be accepted again? Would he have to give up his dream of becoming the next Hokage? He wandered around the small room, running his fingers over the familiar walls. It was an oddly sentimental action, not something that you would expect him to do. For 16 years of his life, this apartment had been his home. Returning to it gave him this warm feeling, deep inside his chest. He headed into the bathroom, towards the inviting shower. He desperately needed to clean himself off. Naruto swore he had grime in places he'd never even known he had. Hopefully no one had turned off the water. Or the electricity. Otherwise he was in for a really bad shower. Itsuki's was a classy place. The Akamichi clan had been lucky to buy the restaurant when its previous owners had left following the 4th Shinobi War. So it made perfect sense that Chaoji was having a hard time convincing his dad to let him have an entire table reserved for him and his friends. Chaoji, you cannot have a table. It's too short notice. Besides, we're almost completely booked. Now, Chaoji may have been a powerful 20-year-old level shinobi, but he was still rather good at whining to his parents. But Dad, I already told everyone I could get us in. Toza Akimichi sighed. Why exactly do you want a table anyway? I'm sure it's not just so you can sit and chat. Taoji looked sheepish. Actually dad, it kind of is. Taoji saw the look on his dad's face and hurried to continue. You see the thing is, well, you know Naruto. Toza nodded. Who didn't know the former Hokage candidate who had left Konoha? Well, he's kind of back. Toza's eyebrows shot upwards. The Uzumaki kid had returned. This changed everything. You know what, Taoji, I think a table might have opened up after all. His son grinned. Thanks dad. He turned to leave and then quickly spun round again. Oh, I almost forgot. We've arranged to meet at 7 o'clock. I'll have the table, Taoji. I promise. Choza watched his son leave with a spring in his step and prepared to leave as well. The Noichi and Shikaku needed to hear about Naruto's return. It was starting to wear off. He could now move all the fingers on his right hand. It wasn't a lot, but it was a start. Soon. He just had to bide his time. It was nearing the time. 13 young ninja were getting ready for a night at one of Konoha's most exclusive restaurants. The evening was sure to be interesting, to say the least. The venue was set. No one had doubted Chaoji's ability to get a table at Natsuki's. There was no way Choza would turn down the chance to have Naruto's official reunion dinner at his restaurant. The sheer amount of publicity that would come from it was huge. People talked, and soon enough, everyone would be clamoring to get a seat at Natsuki's in hope of seeing the famous blind for themselves. It also helped that Natsuki's was a rather expensive restaurant and Naruto was known to be quite the eater. The aforementioned blonde had taken a rather long shower and managed to get off 2 days worth of dust and grime. Luckily, the water had been hot. Naruto stepped out of the shower in a cloud of steam. It felt good to actually be having a proper clean. He shook the water out of his hair and wrapped a towel around his waist. He walked out of the bathroom and went in search of clothing. Opening his wardrobe door, he was met with a sorry sight. 2 sets of his old black and orange tracksuit hung there, along with something in a dry cleaner's bag. Damn it, thought Naruto. He'd forgotten that when he'd left the village, he'd sealed most of his clothing into a scroll and taken it with him. Most of the clothes he'd taken with him had been destroyed in various fights or worn out from general wear and tear. Naruto pulled out one of the tracksuits. Despite having lain unworn for 4 years, it still retained its cheery bright orange color. He held the tracksuit against himself, jacket shoulders to his shoulders. It was too short. It seemed he'd definitely outgrown his old garments. He hung the tracksuit back on the rack and pulled out the other one. It was also, as expected, much too short. Hanging it back up, he took out the item of clothing in the bag. He could not for the life of him remember what was in there. Hoping for some article of clothing which could be worn to a classy restaurant, Naruto unzipped the bag and carefully took out the garment inside. Handling it carefully, he held it up. His eyes widened. After an awkward period where the two had just walked in silence, Ino managed to drag Sakura out shopping. Sakura had tried protesting, but Ino had just not listened. It's Natsuki's, Sakura. It's not a ramen stand where you can show up in your medic uniform. You need something nice. Sakura gave up trying to make Ino let her go. It would just be easier to go along with it. Ino dragged her into store after store and both girls tried on outfit after outfit, Ino with much enthusiasm and Sakura not so much. Ino quickly found something she liked, but Sakura did not possess that luck. Sakura felt like she'd tried on hundreds of different dresses, skirts, tops and jackets, but nothing got Ino's stamp of approval. I swear Ino, this is the last store. Said a rather exasperated Sakura as Ino dragged her into yet another boutique. Yeah, Sakura. Look, I know you'll definitely find something in here. Ino waved the remark off and made a beeline towards a rack of dresses. Picking out several, she threw them into Sakura's arms and all but pushed her into a changing room. Sakura looked exhaustedly at the 5 dresses Ino had given her. After immediately eliminating 2 for being a bit too revealing, Sakura was left with 3. The first was a simple black dress that looked promising. Unfortunately, it proved quite a struggle to get into, being 2 sizes too small. Feeling rather like an overstuffed pillow, Sakura stuck her head out of the changing room curtain. Ino? She asked a girl who was absent-mindedly admiring a pink scarf. Ino turned around. Sakura, get out of the changing room. She exclaimed, hands on hips. How am I supposed to see what you look like if you don't come out? Well, how am I supposed to wear this thing when it's way too small? Replied Sakura, still refusing to leave the changing room. Well, so are I. Huffed Ino. It was the only one left. Just try one of the other ones on. Sakura sighed. She was going to be there all day, wasn't she? At this rate, they'd never make it out of the store, let alone to Natsuki's. The next dress was treated to a long list of Ino's criticisms. Too long. The neckline's off. That shade of pink clashes with your hair and washes you out at the same time. Plus, it's super childish and makes you look like 12-year-old. Sakura agreed with Ino's remarks on the hot pink baby doll dress. Heading back into the changing room, she desperately hoped that this last dress would be the one. Otherwise she was going to show up to Natsuki's in her spare medic uniform. Perfect. Squealed Ino when Sakura stepped out. Buy it. The blue dress was simple, yet elegant. It fit Sakura like it was made for her. The shade of dark, slate blue worked well with Sakura's rather bright hair. It was made of a light silky material, with spaghetti straps, just perfect for a hot summer night. Sakura liked it. Unlike some of the other things she had tried on, this one just felt right. It felt good to be buying something nice. She hadn't really gone shopping in a while. She'd really just not had the time, what with working in the hospital for most of her days. Wow. She'd really let her social life fall apart, hadn't she? Sakura. Hello, Sakura. Are you buying the dress? Sakura shook her head slightly. Ino was waving her hand in front of her face, trying to attract Sakura's attention. Sorry, I must have just zoned out there. Apologized to Sakura. Yes, I'm going to buy the dress. Ino grinned. Sakura changed out of the dress and headed to the counter to pay for it. On their way out, they noticed Hinata and Tenten walking past, with Niji and Kiba following behind them, both carrying large loads of flowers. Hey guys. What's up with the flowers? Called Ino, waving. The four stopped and waited for Ino and Sakura to catch up to them. Hi Sakura. Hi Ino. Chirped Tenten. The flowers. They're just samples of flower arrangements for the wedding. Niji and I were just at your shop. Your dad was so helpful. Wait a second. It makes sense that Niji was there, but why are Hinata and Kiba with you? Asked Sakura. Hinata smiled at Kiba, who was scowling under a pile of blue, white, and purple flowers. I dragged Kiba along with me to this. He didn't really know what he was getting into when he agreed to help me. He was supposed to just walk me home. He's probably regretting it now. The girls laughed as the group walked out of the main shopping streets. They made small talk, avoiding any topics that may come up at the night's dinner. Finally they reached the Hyuga estate and said goodbye to Niji, Tenten, and Hinata. See you guys at dinner. Called Ino as she, Sakura, and Kiba walked off. So said Kiba, feeling just a little bit awkward. Naruto's back. He paused, waiting for a reaction from Sakura. In return, he only got a simple yes. And? He asked, pushing for more. He'd avoided bringing the topic up before, not really wanting to mention him around Hinata. Maybe now he could talk to someone about Naruto's return. Instead, all he got was Ino grabbing onto a tense Sakura's arm. And we'll see you at dinner. She said, before she and Sakura turned and left him walking alone. Great. He said to nobody, walking home to get ready. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time, till then sayonara.